Sean Diddy Combs was convicted on 2 federal charges, each carrying up to 10 years in prison. But now, in a twist maybe no one saw coming, reports say President Donald Trump's team has been in talks with Diddy's lawyers about a possible presidential pardon. Could Trump really set Diddy free? Is this justice, politics, maybe payback?
He was already behind bars when the rumors started, locked away, forgotten by the industry he once dominated. The suits, the private jets, the red carpets, all stripped away, replaced with cement walls, fluorescent lights, and the sound of cold steel doors slamming shut.
Trial, 7 weeks of testimony and a verdict that ended in Sean Diddy Combs' conviction on 2 federal sex crimes charges. Could he be pardoned by the President of the United States? You know, that is a question that came up a lot when we were doing the live streams of the Diddy trial every day on YouTube. I never really considered it as a real possibility, but I'll tell you what, now, based on current reporting, we may have to take this seriously. Oh, and in terms of relief for Diddy, we also have to get into his defense team's new memo that they filed arguing that his conviction should be thrown out, or at the very least, he should get a new trial. We're going to talk about that too. And by the way, let me tell you, we have an amazing guest who I'm going to be bringing on in a little bit, somebody who actually helped secure federal pardons for his clients, including from President Trump, and is an expert in criminal law, has been following this case from the very beginning. I'm going to bring him on in a little bit. But why do I say that we have to take pardons seriously now? Why? Well, TMZ has reported that President Donald Trump's administration has been talking to Diddy's legal team about a potential pardon, a forgiveness for a federal crime. It's enshrined in the Constitution. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, the president shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. And according to TMZ, his decision to pardon Diddy may be determined based on if Judge Arun Subramanian grants Diddy bail, which, by the way, we dedicated a whole sidebar to the other day. His team just filed a brand new letter with the court asking for him to be released. I broke it down, discussed all those arguments. But TMZ also has reported that the pardon decision could also come down to how Diddy is ultimately sentenced on October 3rd. And remember, he was acquitted of racketeering and sex trafficking, but he was found guilty of the 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, the Mann Act violations, namely transporting his exes, Jane and Cassie Ventura Fine, and men across state lines for the purposes of sex work. Each charge carries up to 10 years in prison, although I'll tell you, in a prior filing, the government was looking at roughly 4 to 5 year prison sentence. Mind you, this is before a pre-sentencing report has been prepared for the court, which does a full background check and analysis of Diddy's life and crimes. Now, the defense would definitely love time served and he gets out, or 21 to 27 months. And remember, at the time of sentencing, he'll have been locked up.
Diddy wasn't living anymore. He was surviving, and then he heard the name Trump, the same name that sent shockwaves through courtrooms, headlines, and elections. And now that name was being whispered through prison walls, passed from one inmate to another, through guards who spoke in hushed tones, through legal aides who suddenly started watching him differently. At first, he didn't believe it. Why would Trump step in for him? What did they even have in common now? But the whispers grew louder, and the silence from the outside world that broke too. Something was happening, and Diddy felt it. He was losing it, not because he was weak, but because he knew what it meant to have control. And now he had none. He paced the cell. Days blurred. Nights were louder. The world outside kept spinning, and he was stuck in rewind. But this rumor, this name, it was a glitch in the system. There are people on the inside who know this case was mishandled. I can't say too much, but let's just say if certain documents come to light, the public will be shocked. The panel went quiet. The host blinked. The clip exploded on
pardon, meaning Diddy, let's say he gets 5 years in prison, Trump pardons him, he's free to go? President Trump was asked about this a few months ago before the verdict. This was back in May. And he said when asked about a pardon for Diddy, I would certainly look at the facts. If I think somebody was mistreated, whether they like me or don't like me, it wouldn't have any impact on me. He used to really like me a lot, but I think when I ran for politics, that relationship busted up from what I read. I don't know, he didn't tell me that, but I'd read some little bit nasty statements in the paper all of a sudden. And Diddy had been photographed with Trump over the years. There was some sort of relationship there. President Trump even called him a good friend on a 2012 episode of his TV show The Apprentice. Problem is, some comments Diddy made about Trump in recent years as Diddy really entered the political realm. There's a video where he's speaking to radio host Charlemagne saying, if Trump gets elected, I really do believe in my heart there'll be a race war. In another video on Revolt, he says white men like Trump need to be banished. And by the way, you know who's not letting anyone forget this? Combs' rival 50 Cent took to social media recently, wrote, see, Trump don't like S like this, buddy. You run your mouth too much. And Donald doesn't take well to disrespect and doesn't forget who chooses to go against him. While working tirelessly to make America great again, there is no room for distraction. He would consider pardoning anyone who is being mistreated, not Puff Daddy. And let me tell you, the idea of Trump pardoning Diddy is not getting a ton of love out there. Conservative commentator Megyn Kelly posted on X, Trump should not pardon Diddy. He doesn't deserve it. He's a Trump hater. He's a woman abuser. MAGA is already upset over elites seeming to cover for each other. This would not help. GOP struggling with young female voters, most of whom will hate a Diddy pardon. And then you just had other random accounts like America First. What? He's actually considering this? Diddy is a depraved, abusive, sexual deviant who should be spending the rest of his life in prison. If Trump pardons him, he will get absolutely crushed. Who is advising him lately? It's looking like straight up sabotage at this point. There were other accounts that were not in favor of it, although there was this account. Milo posted on X, Trump has no choice but to pardon Diddy after the government, led by James Comey's daughter Maureen, simply lost interest in Diddy's guilt the moment they secured his tapes incriminating powerful Democrats. The prosecution was a shambles. The trial was a farce. Now, I want to talk about if this is really going to happen, how it would happen. Also, if it really depends on bail and sentencing, then what are we talking about? And I have somebody who not only has been following the Diddy case from the very beginning, not only is a renowned criminal defense attorney, but actually has obtained federal pardons from the president, including from Donald Trump. By the way, for his clients Kodak Black and Lil Wayne, those were maybe the most notable. I'm joined by Bradford Cohen. Bradford, thank you so much for coming here on Sidebar. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jess.
Now, before I even get into the pardon, okay, there's a bit of breaking news before we were going to come on. This is what I want to get your opinion on first. So Combs' defense team filed a memo in support of a motion for judgment of acquittal, or in the alternative, a motion for a new trial. And basically, I know you read through it, but basically the evidence, they would say, is insufficient to sustain that conviction. Their main arguments is really echoing what we've talked about a little bit when it came to the bail analysis, but that his prosecution, his conviction on these Mann Act prostitution charges is so unique. He wasn't
He wasn't pro, it was possibility. Behind closed doors, Trump's advisors were reportedly moving. Quiet meetings, closed door calls, legal strategies. It wasn't official. It wasn't public. But insiders knew this wasn't noise. This was intent. Back in Diddy's cell, he stared at the wall. He didn't eat, didn't sleep. He just waited, eyes locked on the door like it might swing open any second and change everything. And then it started to shift. A visit from a federal agent, unscheduled, unexplained. Then a sealed envelope. His legal team reappeared with fresh documents. Not appeals, not objections. Something else. Something higher. The prison staff changed their tone. Officers who once treated him like a number now looked at him sideways. Cautiously. Curiously higher. The prison staff changed their tone. Officers who once treated him like a number now looked at him sideways. Cautiously, curiously, something was moving, and he felt it. He broke down in his cell that night, not from guilt, not from sorrow, but from rage. Rage that he had been caged. Rage that it took this long. Rage that it might take someone like Trump to shake the gates. He wasn't crying from loss. He was crying from a possibility of getting it all back. The facility buzzed with rumors.
Profiting off of this business. All consenting adults were involved. The jury didn't find that there was any sex trafficking. They argued this isn't even prostitution per se, it's voyeurism, that the intent wasn't for people to travel for sex for money, but he paid them for their time. Everybody was having a good time. He makes a First Amendment argument that the freak-offs and the hotel nights were performances that were typically videotaped so they could watch them later on. It's just amateur pornography. And then finally makes the argument that he was prejudiced because of all the other evidence that came in to prove RICO, or sex trafficking and would have never came in if he was merely being prosecuted for prostitution, particularly the Intercontinental Hotel footage of him purporting to beat up Cassie Ventura Fine. And he says, at the very least, he needs a new trial. I hand it over to you. You think this is a successful argument?
Thank you. I don't know if it's going to be successful in the judgment of acquittal. I think the argument is interesting because everyone agrees he might be the only person in custody right now that has ever been convicted of the Mann Act. The Mann Act, and it gives a nice history of the Mann Act, and a lot of people don't understand what the Mann Act is, but the Mann Act was enacted because of a racist motivation that white women were being recruited by people of color to go across state lines and make money. So actually pimping those women across state lines and making money off of their sexual exploits. Obviously, that's not the case here. It's used so infrequently, it might have been a handful of people were actually charged with the Mann Act. No one in custody currently has ever been convicted of the Mann Act. So it's an interesting argument to say, hey, listen, this Mann Act, the original reason for it was racist. The original way that it was applied was racist. The way it's applied here is incorrect because he was not making any money from quote unquote pimping or getting these women across or men getting them across state lines. None of that was being done. This was all being done for entertainment purposes. So it's an interesting argument. I don't think this judge buys it. It might be interesting on an appeal, but I don't think the judge is going to give him a judgment of acquittal on those two counts based on the argument. Now, the more interesting argument to me, and it's their last argument for new trial, is that, listen, if you were just going to charge him with these two counts, which I originally said when I looked at all the evidence, and don't forget, I was getting calls during this trial from individuals that were telling me, hey, I have information that exonerates what they're saying against Sean Combs, essentially saying that Cassie and others were participating more than just having sex in a room. They were participating more than that. They were paying people. They were hiring people. They were sending me pictures even when Diddy wasn't around. They were asking me to come over even when Diddy wasn't around. These are what these witnesses were telling me, which is really Brady evidence. And I don't know if that was ever turned over. But the more interesting argument is that all these counts were charged. The only thing he was convicted of were the Mann Acts. And he probably wouldn't have been convicted of these Mann Acts, but for all this other stuff that came in to try and prove these counts that they could not prove and did not have a basis for bringing.
Let me just challenge you on that, because this is a jury who didn't find that there was sex trafficking. And I can't confirm that they found him guilty of the Mann Act because of the hotel video or anything else. I mean, it seems to me that they might have convicted him on that based on the travel records, the payment receipt.
Inmates passed
notes. Guards muttered in corners. Diddy had become more than a prisoner. He was a symbol, a man who had fallen hard, but might be lifted again by the strangest of allies. Every eye in that prison was watching him now, watching his every move, his every twitch, wondering, is this really happening? And did he? He leaned into it. Suddenly, he was sitting straighter, his gaze steadier. He started asking for meetings with his legal team twice a day. He began organizing his thoughts, dictating notes, forming a new plan, not about survival, but about return. Because this wasn't just about release anymore. This was about redemption. He knew the Trump connection wasn't just a lifeline. It was a headline, and that headline had power. Or this was about redemption. He knew the Trump connection wasn't just a lifeline. It was a headline, and that headline had power. Outside the walls, Trump's team was laying groundwork. Strategists floated terms like selective prosecution, celebrity bias, deep state sabotage.
It's, all about that, not even necessarily allegations of violence. I mean, do you think that it was because of, let's say, the Intercontinental Hotel video that he was convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution? It always felt to me that they proved that charge based purely on, the documents.
Well, I always feel like during a trial, whenever you get a guilty verdict on one of the counts or two of the counts out of 6 or 7, you think to yourself, is it because of these other things that they brought up? How bad he is, he's not a good guy, the video came out. sometimes juries will split the baby, meaning, there's people that want to convict, there's people that don't want to convict, and they're like, okay, let's convict him on these acts. We can all agree we can convict him on these acts. He's not a good guy. He transported these men across state lines. Let's convict him on this. There's always going to be a question of that. The only way to not have a question of that, obviously, is when the jury comes out, someone gives an interview and says, hey, this is why we did it, is because, this tape was so bad and these other incidents were so bad that we were like, we can't just let him walk with nothing. So we convicted him on the Mann Acts. Now, we don't have a juror saying that. Do I think eventually jurors are going to start coming out? Yeah, I think so. I think some of these jurors are going to come out. They're going to want to do some interviews, not before sentencing. And I think after sentencing, I think some of them will come out and we'll discuss it, because I think that was the feeling I was getting from this jury and the reactions they had to Comey's closing, and even the reaction just in general to the 5 or the 6 U.S. attorney team. I think their reactions in general were very noticeable, and I think that this is a jury that wants to talk to people once I think he gets sentenced.
Okay, so now let's move on to the pardon discussion. So if he can't get relief from the court in getting the conviction thrown out or a new trial, can he get relief through a pardon? Before we talk about, is this a real thing, what is the process to even obtain a federal pardon? How do you even go about that?
Sure. So it's a pardon or a commutation. If someone is actually in custody, they could also get a commutation, which does not wipe the crime off your record. It just allows you to get out of jail. So he has that option to give him a commutation. If he gets sentenced, he can also give him a commutation. But as for the process, there's an application on the DOJ website, and I'm part of some charities that also do a lot of pro bono work for pardons and commutations. You can fill out this form, DOJ website. It essentially lists, the reasons why you should get a pardon, what kind of community service you've done, things of that nature. There's a separate application for commutation, but you can file a pardon application, and you could also say, hey, listen, if it's not a pardon, I'm looking for a commutation. You attach your indictment. You would reasons why you feel your crime was unfairly, you were unfairly prejudiced or unfairly convicted. All of those things go into the packet. I always try to help people that are filling it out on their own to show them, what to point out. Those type of cases are always heartening, because those people deserve pardons. They deserve commutations if they're in, and it's some sort of crazy drug offense that was brought up in the 90s. All of those things are reasons for pardons and commutations.
So is this real? I mean, here's the thing. He is in a much better position to get a pardon or a commutation of it.
Conservative pundits picked up the scent. Talk shows began to question whether Diddy's sentence was exaggerated. The phrase railroaded showed up on Fox News. Blogs on the far right and far left both started asking the same question. Was this really justice? And once that question hit the airwaves, it couldn't be taken back. The story shifted. It wasn't just about Diddy's crimes anymore. It was about narrative, about control, about two powerful men, both bruised by the system, potentially teaming up openly or secretly to flip the script. The court responded with silence. No comment, no leaks, but the pressure was mounting. Some insiders said Trump had reached out to certain officials, not directly, but through channels, former staffers, allies, legal consultants. The message was subtle, but clear. This case had political weight now, and political weight has a way of tipping scales. Back inside, Diddy exploded. He wasn't content to sit still anymore. He demanded new motions, new hearings. He told his lawyers to kick the doors down. He raged at guards, slammed his fist into the wall. Not because he was losing, but because he might be winning, and it wasn't happening fast enough. They put him in solitary for a night, not for violence, for volatility. But even in that small dark cell, he felt the shift. He knew the cameras outside were rolling, that every leak, every whisper, every news statement from Trump's orbit was oxygen to his cause. And that's what made him dangerous again, because hope is the most combustible fuel in the world. And Diddy had it again. The next move wasn't subtle. A major Trump ally, a former campaign strategist with deep ties to federal prosecutors, went live on national television and dropped the bombs. There are people on the inside who know this case was mishandled. I can't say too much, but let's just say if certain documents come to light, the public will be shocked. The panel went quiet. The host
The sentence because he wasn't convicted of sex trafficking and racketeering. There is a way to justify this based on some of the arguments I just mentioned that his defense team is making, that maybe he shouldn't have been brought up on this. You know, the Mann Act, not as serious as what he's facing. Is this real? Do you think that this is going to happen? That he's going to get a pardon or a commutation from President Trump?
I don't know if he's going to get one. I do think that it's real because, like I said before, President Trump, whether they like him, don't like him, if he feels something is wrong, and we've seen this happen before in the past, if he feels something is wrong, someone got railroaded, someone was convicted, wrongfully, he will take a look at that. Yeah, Sean Combs has said things in the past that probably were not great. I've read them, but I think that if anyone understands that, I mean, look at President Trump's cabinet. There's individuals on his cabinet. His vice president has said things in the past that weren't great for him. But he understands that people evolve, people change their minds. People understand that there's certain requirements, things that are going on, certain pressures that they're under. And I don't think that would affect whether or not he would grant a pardon or commutation based on things that were said in the past. I think it would be based on what he gets sentenced to, or based on the facts of the Mann Act, that the Mann Act itself, I think, is unconstitutional. I think there's issues the way that it was applied in this case.
But from an optics point of view, I don't know, moral point of view, what about everything that came out of trial? The texts, the bruises, the Intercontinental tape. It's not like you can say Diddy is totally clean, that he's a complete angel. Yes, he was acquitted of the most serious charges, but the evidence that came out during the course of the trial, wouldn't it be difficult for the president to justify maybe pardoning Diddy? Maybe it is a commutation. Maybe it is, if he gets 5 years, he says, okay, I'm commuting it down to 2 or 2.5. I don't know how it would work, but that's the part that I think people might be struggling with, and what you heard, I think, from Megyn Kelly.
And even his own lawyers, no one was coming out here saying that Sean Combs is an angel, that Sean Combs doesn't do anything that is off the wall, crazy. These things, no one is claiming that. And in fact, even during my interviews, when I was saying things that weren't so popular, saying like, listen, he's only going to get convicted of these Mann Acts, I don't think he's going to get convicted of anything. And people were attacking me and saying like, you like, abusers. That's not the point here. The point is to look at the law, apply the law fairly, apply the facts to the law. That's what's important here. And that's what I was doing when I was looking at the case. Looking at this from that standpoint, he's going to have been in for about 15 or 16 months by the time he gets sentenced. It's not like he got a freebie. If he got a misdemeanor battery, he would have served 364 days in jail. If he got a couple charges, maybe he would have served 2 years in jail. If this judge decides to give him 4 or 5 years based on this, do I think that's unfair? Yes. Do I think President Trump would look at that and say this needs to be communed to time served, or communed down to 18 months because he is 15 months in? I think so. I think that would be the fair thing to do. Whether or not he does it, I have no idea. I mean, I don't think President Trump does things because it's popular and unpopular all the time. People seem to think that a lot of people in politics do things that the masses are like, oh, this is unpopular or this is popular. President Trump does what is the right thing to do. And if he feels this is the right thing to do, I think that he would then do it. That's my opinion. I don't think he's looking.
That's an explanation. Explanation. No, that's at least an explanation, because a lot of people would say, I don't know what he has to gain by doing this. But by you saying, if he just, hey, I don't care where it puts me politically, but if I think it's the right thing, if I think there's an injustice, then I'm going to do it. I mean, look, he has pardoned other celebrities, not just Lil Wayne and Kodak Black, but
there are people on the inside who know this case was mishandled. I can't say too much, but let's just say if certain documents come to light, the public will be shocked. The panel went quiet. The host blinked. The clip exploded online. Diddy's name trended again, not because of his crimes, but because of what might be undone. Inside the prison, the tension reached a fever pitch. Did he pace like a lion in a cage? He refused meals. He demanded transcripts. He tore through every lead again, not because of his crimes, but because of what might be undone. Inside the prison, the tension reached a fever pitch. Did he pace like a lion in a cage? He refused meals. He demanded transcripts. He tore through every legal document he could get his hands on. Something in him snapped, and not in the way people expected. It wasn't despair. It was calculation. He started planning his return, not hypothetically, but concretely. Who he would speak to first, what show he would appear on, what message he'd send. He wasn't thinking like a prisoner anymore. He was thinking like a player. The guards took notice. One even said, off the record, he doesn't belong here. Not because he's innocent, but because he's dangerous when he has hope. Meanwhile, legal gears were turning faster than anyone expected. Emergency reviews were filed, evidence re-examined. Old connections started reappearing in the form of expert witnesses ready to testify not on innocence, but on judicial misconduct. The case that had once felt closed now felt wide open. And Trump, he kept the pressure steady. More interviews, more signals. He never explicitly said pardon, but the suggestion hung in the air like smoke in a burning room. It wasn't about friendship. It was about disruption. Two men, both symbols of a system that tried to bury them, now potentially aligned for reasons neither had to explain. It didn't matter if it was sincere. It didn't matter if it was strategic. It just mattered that it was happening. And the media couldn't look away. Neither could the courts. What was supposed to be a closed chapter had become a new prologue. Diddy's team leaked a statement. We are exploring all options. The legal process continues. It was short, but the message was loud. This wasn't over. And Diddy was done pretending to accept fate.